Rex Ryan didn't just question Shedeur Sanders' talent, he questioned his character. That kind of public dismissal hit differently, especially coming from a former head coach known for his own brash persona. The irony? Ryan's critique echoed a deeper pattern in NFL commentary, a willingness to attack outspoken black athletes for the very traits celebrated in others. In this case, Shedeur wasn't just being judged for his play.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
He was being judged for being Deion Sanders' son, for carrying himself with confidence, and for refusing to shrink in the face of criticism. That moment wasn't an outburst, it was a breaking point. Shedeur's response wasn't defensive, it was decisive. He challenged the assumptions head-on, not just to defend himself, but to spotlight how deeply flawed the system of judgment really is. He's not interested in protecting his image, he's focused on reshaping the narrative for every athlete who gets reduced to a soundbite or stereotype. By confronting disrespect directly, he's forcing a long-overdue conversation about bias, perception, and what real leadership looks like in today's NFL. Shedeur Sanders didn't just show up in the NFL. He arrived with noise already trailing him, criticism, commentary, and a narrative that wasn't even his. Before he threw a single pass as a professional, he was already being dissected, dismissed, and defined by people who had never spoken to him, watched his film in full, or bothered to understand who he really was. And all of it, the whispers about entitlement, the eye rolls at his confidence, the lazy comparisons to his father, came down to one thing: perception. The NFL didn't just see Shedeur as a quarterback. It saw him as a symbol, not for his generation, but for everything the old guard in the league still can't figure out how to deal with. A young, confident, outspoken black quarterback who didn't apologize for his presence. And for some, that was enough to write him off completely. It didn't matter how well he performed at Jackson State or what he did under pressure at Colorado. It didn't matter that he put up numbers, led with composure, and took beatings behind a weak offensive line without folding. Because when the draft came around, what mattered wasn't what he had done. It was what people thought of him. Or more accurately, what people thought of his father. The shadow of Deion Sanders is long. That's undeniable. But for Shedeur, it became more than just a legacy. It became a label. NFL insiders, scouts, and media outlets weren't just evaluating him as a player. They were projecting everything they ever thought about primetime onto a 21-year-old kid who'd done nothing but handle his business. That's how you get a fifth-round pick with the stats of a Day 2 quarterback. That's how you end up with conversations about character concerns that have no source, no context, no truth, just recycled assumptions. And that's the problem. When you're confident and your last name is Sanders, the bar isn't raised, it's moved entirely. You're no longer being judged by your talent. You're being judged by whether or not your confidence makes other people uncomfortable. And it clearly did. The NFL still clings to an outdated idea of how quarterbacks should act. Respectful, quiet, always saying the right thing, grateful for the opportunity. They want humility, but only when it's performative. Because swagger is only celebrated when it's packaged correctly. When it fits the brand. When it comes from the right person. Shedeur didn't fit that mold. He wore his watch. He talked his talk. He walked into rooms like he belonged there. And for some reason, that was interpreted as arrogance. But here's what those people missed: he did belong there. His play spoke for itself. His leadership spoke louder. But the louder truth? They weren't listening. They never planned to. And when Rex Ryan decided to insert himself into the conversation, that bias was on full display. Rex didn't critique Shedeur's tape. He didn't point to his performance. He questioned his character. He brought up distractions, entitlement, and attitude as if they were established facts. As if he knew Shedeur personally. As if being Deion's son automatically made him a problem. That's where Shedeur drew the line. He didn't rant. He didn't spiral. He simply asked the question, where is this coming from? Because it certainly wasn't from anything he's done on or off the field. There's been no controversy. No behavior issues. No red flags. Just opinions rooted in discomfort, not reality. That's what made Shedeur's response so sharp and so necessary. He didn't just defend himself. He exposed the double standard. He forced people to confront the fact that he was being judged for things he hadn't done by people who couldn't point to a single example. And what happened next? Exactly what you'd expect. The conversation didn't shift toward his performance. It didn't lead to accountability. It just got quieter. Because once you pull the curtain back and there's no scandal, no evidence, no behavior to point to, the story collapses. So now, Shedeur is in Cleveland. Not with a spotlight. Not with the media circus. But with an opportunity. A real one. The kind you don't get by talking. The kind you earn through every quiet rep, every film session, every moment where the outside world stops paying attention. This is the part they never cover. The months in between. The part where players rebuild their image not through press, but through presence. And Shedeur has been present. He's shown up and done exactly what the critics said he wouldn't. He's kept his head down, stayed focused, and earned the respect of the people who actually matter. His coaches. His teammates. The locker room. He's not chasing headlines. He's building trust. That's the part the league never saw coming. The version of Shedeur that isn't built for the media but built for Sundays. And it's only a matter of time before that version steps onto the field and changes the narrative without saying a word. Because the truth is, Shedeur doesn't have to prove anyone wrong anymore. He just has to keep proving himself right. And every single person who counted him out, they're going to have to reckon with the fact that they never gave him a fair shot in the first place. That they let perception cloud potential. That they let a last name erase everything the first name had built. And when that moment comes, when Shedeur Sanders steps onto the field, not as a legacy kid or a media headline, but as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, it won't just be about one game. Or one season. It'll be about the long game he's been playing this whole time. A game built on patience, composure, accountability, and most importantly, authenticity. Because Shedeur has never tried to be anyone but himself. And that, more than anything, is what separates him from the pack. In a league that forces players to fit into a mold, he's been carving out his own identity. In a league that punishes confidence in the wrong hands, he's refused to let go of his. And in a league that celebrates underdogs while quietly dismantling their rise, he's building something they can't take from him, a reputation rooted in truth, not opinion. That's the real story. Not the media takes. Not the legacy baggage. Not the draft snub. The story is that Shedeur Sanders walked through it all without changing who he was. And now, he's on the verge of proving that being yourself isn't just enough, it's unstoppable. If you've followed this story, if you've seen the bias, the contradictions, the shifting goalposts, drop a comment and let us know what you see. Like the video if you're tired of perception getting more airtime than performance. And share this if you know someone still stuck on the old script. Because when Shedeur's moment comes, and it will, there won't be anything left to argue. Just facts. Just stats. Just a quarterback who earned it all. On his own terms. When Shedeur Sanders takes the field not as a novelty, not as Deion's son, not as the media's scapegoat of the month, but as QB1, it won't be sudden. It'll feel like a storm that's been building quietly for years. The winds have shifted. The silence has grown thick. And all the league's pre-written narratives? They're about to get drowned out by the sound of reality finally catching up. Because for all the talking they've done, about ego, about image, about how Shedeur needed to mature, not one of them has had the courage to go back and revisit the facts. Not the tape. Not the interviews. Not the actual man beneath the shadow of the Sanders name. Let's go back for a second. This is someone who went from dominating at Jackson State to getting beat up every week at Colorado, and never once let the media define the season for him. That offensive line? Historically bad. The criticism? Unrelenting. The spotlight? Never turned off. And yet, Shedeur kept showing up, kept producing, and kept leading. That's not privilege. That's not hype. That's resilience. But when draft day rolled around, you could feel it. The league had made its decision before a single name was called. Shedeur wasn't just being evaluated, he was being punished. For being too visible. For being too confident. For refusing to soften his edges. And that's what nobody wanted to say out loud. Shedeur didn't drop because of football. He dropped because the NFL still doesn't know how to handle players who refuse to play small. Especially not when those players are young, black, confident, and come from legacy. Because the truth is, the NFL's relationship with legacy is selective. It's fine when your dad was a coach. It's fine when your uncle's in a front office. But when your father is Deion Sanders, a black man who built an empire without asking for permission, it suddenly becomes nepotism. And let's be really clear, the nepotism narrative was never about fairness. It was about control. It was about reminding players like Shedeur that if they don't enter quietly, the league will make them wait longer. That swagger will cost them. That visibility without submission will be punished. And yet, he still came. He still suited up. He still walked into the Cleveland Browns facility. No press tour, no drama, just focus. He did what so many said he wouldn't. He showed he could lead without the cameras. That he could take the disrespect and still handle his business. And not just handle it, excel through it. Because what's happening behind the scenes now is the part nobody talks about. He's not just getting reps. He's learning, absorbing, sharpening. He's stepping into a new chapter not as someone demanding the spotlight, but as someone biding his time, because he knows the spotlight will come to him anyway. And when it does, the script won't have a place to hide. All those tired phrases, character concerns, too flashy, media circus, will have to be walked back. All the coded language will unravel under the weight of actual results. The truth is, Shedeur's always been ready. It's just taken the league far too long to stop judging him by someone else's story. And now that he's carving out his own, the industry's going to have to deal with what happens when the person they tried to contain refuses to shrink. Because Shedeur's not just challenging football norms, he's challenging cultural ones. He's showing a new blueprint for what it looks like to rise with confidence in a system that's allergic to it. He's showing that you don't need to tone down your identity to succeed. That you don't need to play the media's game to be a professional. And that lesson? It's a threat to everything the NFL still holds sacred. The league loves control. It loves the narrative arc where you humble yourself into greatness. But what happens when the greatness was already there, and the humility wasn't performative, but intrinsic? That's what Shedeur represents. And maybe that's why people like Rex Ryan felt so comfortable disrespecting him. Because to them, he didn't follow the script. He didn't come up the way they like. He didn't grovel for respect. So instead of seeing his discipline, his effort, his actual leadership, they fixated on his jewelry. His social media. His father's energy. It's lazy. It's tired. And it's never been more transparent. But Shedeur saw it for what it was. And instead of lashing out, he kept walking. He didn't let one man's bitterness become his baggage. He didn't internalize the doubt. He responded with poise. He asked the right questions. And he went right back to work. Because that's what winners do. And when the time comes, when the league finally catches up to the reality that they've been so slow to accept, Shedeur won't need to remind anyone of the disrespect. The footage will. The performance will. The locker room will. And the media? They'll pivot. Just like they always do. The same talking heads who once mocked his draft status will start praising his poise. The same insiders who once whispered about distractions will say he's matured. They'll pretend they were always in his corner. That they just wanted to see growth. But we'll know the truth. We'll remember the double standards. We'll remember the narratives. We'll remember how quickly they judged a player they never gave a real chance. We'll remember how eager they were to confuse confidence with character flaws. How they mistook style for selfishness. And we'll remember how Shedeur didn't need any of them to believe in him to move forward anyway. Because belief in yourself hits different when no one else was offering it. That's the story. Not a kid living in his father's shadow. Not a quarterback with something to prove. But a professional who knew who he was, even when the world tried to reduce him to someone else's headline. And that's why when he does get his moment, and he will, it won't be a surprise. It'll be inevitable. It'll be a culmination of every quiet workout, every misunderstood quote, every snap in practice where he showed them, again and again, why they got it wrong. And at that point, there won't be a debate. Only receipts. The most dangerous kind of player in the NFL isn't the one with the strongest arm or the fastest 40 time. It's the one with something to prove and the patience to wait for the right moment. And Shedeur Sanders is exactly that. The media tried to paint him as entitled. The scouts labeled him a distraction. Some fans didn't even bother separating him from his father. They just rolled their eyes and lumped him in with whatever image of Deion Sanders they decided they didn't like. But none of that changed Shedeur's mindset. Because behind closed doors, he knew what most of them didn't. He wasn't walking into this league for validation. He was walking in to build something that no one could ever take away from him. His own legacy. That's why when Rex Ryan, of all people, took to the airwaves to call him out, it hit differently. Not because Shedeur hasn't heard worse. But because this time, the attack came not from a Twitter troll, but from someone who helped shape the very league that was already predisposed to doubt him. And let's be real, Rex wasn't offering constructive criticism. He wasn't breaking down film or pointing to in-game decisions. He was attacking Shedeur's character, his maturity, his personality. And for what? Because Shedeur wears a watch? Because he speaks with confidence? Because he carries himself like someone who doesn't owe the league an apology for having a famous last name? What Rex said wasn't just about Shedeur. It was about who's allowed to be confident in the NFL and who's not. And that's the core of this whole story. There's a double standard that hangs over the league like a cloud. If you're a young white quarterback with swagger, it's called leadership. If you're a young black quarterback with swagger, it's called ego. If you speak your mind and come from a football family, they call it pedigree, unless your name is Sanders or James, and then it's nepotism. Shedeur Sanders is breaking that cycle in real time. He didn't fire back with theatrics. He didn't go on a press tour. He didn't feed the flames. He just asked the question everyone else was already thinking. Why do I make you so uncomfortable? And the silence that followed said everything. Because there's no good answer. There never was. This isn't about football. This is about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of a new generation that doesn't play by the league's old unspoken rules. Fear that the next wave of quarterbacks doesn't need to be molded. They're already here, fully formed, unapologetically themselves. And Shedeur? He's the blueprint. He's showing how to handle public pressure with composure. How to respond to cheap shots with professionalism. How to stay grounded when everything around you is designed to knock you off balance. He's not changing to fit the narrative. He's forcing the narrative to evolve. That's what makes his journey so much bigger than just where he was drafted. A fifth-round pick on paper, but a first-round presence in every room he walks into. And it's not just about performance, though that will come. It's about everything he represents. A quarterback who understands his platform. A player who embraces his past without being shackled by it. A leader who talks about respect not as something owed, but as something earned. And that's exactly what he's doing in Cleveland right now. Earning it. Not through press clips or public feuds, but through action. Quiet, consistent, focused action. The kind of grind that doesn't trend on social media, but transforms careers. You can feel it shifting. Slowly, the noise is dying down. The conversations are changing. People are realizing that maybe they judged too quickly. That maybe the things they thought were red flags were actually signs of authenticity. Because confidence isn't arrogance. Visibility isn't vanity. And legacy? Legacy is only a liability if you don't know how to carry it. Shedeur knows. He's been carrying it his whole life. And not just surviving under that pressure. Thriving. Think about it. How many players could be under that much scrutiny, have that much family expectation, be that misunderstood by the national media, and still come into a new team, a new city, and earn respect quietly? No antics. No drama. Just focus. That's what makes his story so compelling. Because while the world expected him to come in loud, he chose to come in real. While everyone waited for him to prove he was his father's son, he made it clear he's his own man. And when his moment finally comes, when he steps under center, helmet on, lights bright, all eyes watching, it's not going to be a redemption arc. It's going to be a confirmation. Confirmation that the draft got it wrong. Confirmation that media narratives don't determine careers. Confirmation that talent, leadership, and perseverance will always rise, no matter how long the wait. And make no mistake, that moment is coming. Because players like Shedeur don't fade away. They don't settle into backup roles and disappear. They prepare. They learn. They wait. And when the opportunity hits, they don't just seize it, they own it. The league loves to act like it wants new voices, new energy, new stories. But it still struggles when those voices don't come wrapped in silence and submission. Shedeur Sanders doesn't need to shout to make his point. His presence says enough. And one day soon, when he steps out onto that field and finally gets his shot, every critic, every doubter, every commentator who dismissed him will have to reckon with the truth they refused to see. That the kid they underestimated was never playing their game. He was building his own. If you've felt that double standard, if you've seen how the league moves goalposts for certain players but cements them for others, share this. Drop a comment with your thoughts. And hit that subscribe if you're ready for a new era of leadership in the NFL, led by players like Shedeur who aren't afraid to be everything they are and nothing they're not. This isn't just a story about football. It's about rewriting the playbook, for respect, for identity, and for what it really means to lead. And Shedeur Sanders? He's just getting started.